Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of Can't Be Bothered.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! And we're coming at you from very different places today. So, Abby, let me know where you're at. I'm pretty sure I know, but
Yeah, if I just duck down here, you can see that I'm at BravoCon.
woo! Such a great background, giving you truly the spotlight that you deserve.
Thank you. Yes, I'm on stage right now doing a full dance performance, so it's pretty grand.
Love, love,
Where are
love.
you with us today?
I'm in Heather's new home, 7 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, about
Damn,
7,900 square feet.
just
Yeah.
casual.
Yeah, just casual. I was just saying to Abby, like, I will always find myself in somebody's living room on this podcast, and today's Heather's. So here I am. I have to
It's
say,
so
like,
fitting.
this living room, it's nice, but it's not quite as like what I would expect for Heather's personality. Like, I kind of imagined her to be in like more of a loungy type of situation. So this is a little surprising, but I also know that at the time, I'm gonna always defend her that she recently just moved in. So, maybe next season we'll see it a little bit differently. But yeah, this is it right now.
Yeah, I see little sprinklings of Heather in there for
Yeah,
sure. It's
little
looking
of
pretty
her.
bare, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure she'll move in a little bit more concretely as time goes on.
Love that. And maybe a little rug. So as everybody can read by the title of today's episode, we're going to be diving into parasocial relationships, which to me is a bit of a newer topic. I'm not super, super, super familiar, but it's something that's definitely come to mind when I think about, sort of the Bravo verse land and people who love Bravo Labs and our connection with them. And I think we saw, especially at BravoCon this year, quite the turnout. And even in 2023, in light of Scandival, there was lots of emotional connection and reaction to it. So I think it's a really interesting topic to delve into. And I know, Abby, you've made a lot of really great and cool research on this, so I'm really excited to get into it.
Aw. Yeah, I think it's really good timing for this topic too, because everything that went down on Salt Lake City with
Mm,
Monica and Reality Von Teese, the big scandalous Instagram account.
yeah.
There was this meme floating around, and I don't know if you saw it, but it was like, in a way, we're all Reality Von Teese.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and I just have kind of been pondering that a lot with this topic coming up and just really thinking about that. Like, in some ways, we have all really involved ourselves and kind of become part of everyone else's stories, even if we weren't actually in their lives.
For
I don't know
sure.
if I would say we're all reality Von Teese because that ain't true, but
Yeah, no, I know when I first saw that meme, I sort of thought about Can't Be Bothered, and
Mhm.
I think that we are definitely more commentary point of view. I think like that was more coming from a lens of trying to take people down, and which is not at all what we're doing here. Of course,
Yeah.
everybody knows that, but it is sort of interesting to think about how we play into things and shape conversations that are even happening on screen. Like talking about social media has become more and more of a thing that they sort of chat about. And we've talked before about like headlines and commentary online as being a big sort of genesis of where a lot of these rumors come from. So I think like it's
Mhm.
interesting to think about how we're sort of attributing to the drama that we see online.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
such a great point. And I love that you made that distinction of like, being on a mission to like take someone down and like
Yeah.
stir things up versus just having commentary and kind of sharing some perspectives on different
Yeah,
situations. I
for
think that's an
sure.
important distinction.
Thanks, B. So, for those of you that don't know, I may just start off class, listen up with a definition of what a
Hmm.
parasocial relationship is. So, technically, a parasocial relationship is a non-reciprocal connection between a fan and a celebrity where one party invests time and emotional energy through repeated contact. And I find like this really interesting in terms of this one-sided aspect and in the age of social media, what that really even looks like. And
Hmm.
if we can even define Bravo Labs as being part of a parasocial relationship. But for lack of a better term, we're basically talking about the connection that we as viewers have with cast members who don't know us. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious to hear your initial thoughts on that and sort of your connection with parasocial relationships.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I hear that definition, there's probably a time that we can think back to where that was much more black and white,
Hmm.
about having those boundaries with celebrities and people in media. Like you're saying, we are just so uh, embedded with people's lives, their day to day. We get Instagram stories and Instagram lives, people sharing their thoughts constantly. We're interacting with them and reacting with them. And um, I wonder if it really can be that one-sided anymore.
Yeah.
Hence BravoCon behind me. I'm kind of like, this is a whole convention that's put together to
Yeah.
bring fans with their celebrities and Bravo celebrities and icons, bring them together to meet and interact. And we've heard stories of, people becoming friends with some of the cast
Yeah.
members and
Yeah.
we've had fans come up on the show before and come up at reunions with their questions. And
Hmm.
so, part of me wonders, is it really that separate anymore?
Hmm.
Can it ever really be that separate anymore?
Yeah.
And at the same time, there is this degree of like we we get to know people really well, especially if they're on TV for a long time, to the point that we think we know them so well.
Yeah.
But there is always that question of how much do we really know them because we're only
Yeah.
getting what's seen on the show, and at the end of the day, it still is a show.
Yeah, 100%. Such great points. And I feel like, as you were saying, it's a little bit different with reality TV stars. I'm just even thinking of like potentially a parasocial relationship between somebody and like an actor in like some few movies every couple of years. To me, that's very different than like reality
Mhm.
TV where it's a lot of it's a lot of content and it's a lot of vulnerable content. Because somebody like Jennifer Lawrence, for example, as just an actress, she doesn't really divulge too much on her day-to-day life and people in her family and sort of insecurities she has.
Mhm.
Like, so to have a type of relationship with an artist in that way, to me, is very different from a reality TV parasocial relationship because we just get to see so much. But as you're saying, are we really getting everything? But I think to some degree we do get, whether if it's real or not, it's vulnerability for
Mhm.
sure. And we feel very much like we know these people and what's going on, but it is to a certain degree like incredibly one-sided because they don't know us. Even though
I
they see
know.
a comment of ours, it's not like a similar sort of reciprocal connection, which is always really interesting. But I do also find that the role of role models in people's stories and especially um people who are like growing up and sort of figuring out who they want to be, I almost feel like reality TV in this way can, I think, be really positive as a way of like identifying with something and saying, like this is, I really like the way that this person handled this conflict, or I would feel really similarly if this happened to me, and I really would want to act this way. I think like
Yeah.
having role models in that way, I think generally, my opinion is that we overlook the importance of that and the significance that that has in our lives.
Mm.
And I think it's really impactful, and it also does have a responsibility on the person to act in a way that, is fair and just and respectable and everything. But with reality TV, we don't always get that. So there is this sort of like weirdness around, I'm feeling really invested in this person and I really identify with the way that she's carrying herself on screen. But then when she handles a conflict really poorly, then what? What do we do with
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. It's tough because you're not having a conversation with them. You're not like,
Yeah.
hey, help me understand like what was going on here.
Mhm.
Those conversations are not being mediated on the show,
Yeah,
right?
100%. Yeah.
And I also have to think too that like when I think about a relationship, like we're relational with other people,
Mhm.
it is um like there's two willing parties. In
Right.
order to have a relationship, you have two willing parties.
Yeah.
And a lot of the information that is shared is non-consensual for people who are in, have a celebrity status, right? There's things that are shared about them constantly that are vulnerable or we would be able to relate to on a deep level. And that's not actually happening consensually on their end, even though we are relating to it and connecting with it,
Yeah.
right? So there is this also side of like, it's not really happening with much willingness, even though
Hmm.
you could say that they are putting themselves out there. It doesn't mean that you just like freely consent to everything that's ever said about you or thrown out or shared
Yeah,
about you, right?
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the sentiment that I saw on TikTok, not anything to do with Bravo Labs necessarily, but this one content creator was basically saying, like, in order to be in this space, a lot of people say that you have to have a really thick skin and take a lot of criticism. And she was like, why is that a credential in order to be making content? Like, if people feel the need to say what they want to say towards me, that's on them, not me. And I feel like that's so part of that consent piece that, like,
Mm,
just because you're putting content out there doesn't mean that you're necessarily saying like anybody can have any sort of connection that they want with me and feel the need and that they have the right to comment and
yeah.
to insert themselves in it. It is it's so tricky, and I feel like this topic really changes depending on the circle that you're looking at. Like we could totally take a deep dive into like TikTok and Instagram and like so many different types of
I
celebrities,
know.
and it's so quickly changing. Um, all the time. And I think the point that you brought up earlier around like Instagram lives, that is like so interesting. Like that is such a because we are able to have like live connection with these people and like kind of
Yeah.
it be like a back and forth conversation. While at the same time, like there's thousands of people joining. So of course it's not like a conversation, but it feels
Yeah.
like one. And I
Yeah.
think like our brains as humans in evolution, when we're having a conversation with somebody, whether it be on screen or in person, it feels like a one-on-one. So
Yeah.
to wrap our brains around the fact that it's not, I can
Yeah.
imagine it would be really difficult for some people. I
Oh
can totally see
man.
that.
Yeah, like we're not special. We would like
No,
to think that we are, but we're not.
no, we're not. No.
Yeah, that's such a good point. There's so many different um platforms for
Mhm.
interacting and having contact, and there's obviously different degrees of contact that we have with them. If it's like liking one of their Twitter posts versus like, hey, my fan question that got sent in was read
Mhm.
out loud, like, or
Yeah.
hey, they brought up like my DM or my something that was said on my podcast. Like, there's different degrees and different levels of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like for me, I think like you were saying at the start of the episode, everything that happened with Scandival, that
Mhm.
was something that really um I don't think I've ever felt so connected
Mhm.
to a Bravo Lab before or to any kind of like celebrity before. And like it wasn't even really an experience that I could relate to other than just like feeling so betrayed and so wronged.
Mhm.
Um, that like I just remember thinking about Ariana constantly. And I know
Mhm.
I'm not the only one,
Yeah.
but like I would just find myself just sitting or like being at work and like through the day it would just pop into my head and I'd be like thinking about her, like
Yeah.
worrying about her or like
Yeah.
what's she
Yeah.
doing or like is she doing okay? And it's almost like you feel like you have this relationship with them where you're like,
Yeah.
I hope they're doing okay. Like I'm thinking about them, and
Yeah.
it's very bizarre to find ourselves at that at that place as a society.
Yeah, for sure. No, that is such a good point. And I think a lot of people would really resonate with that.
Mhm.
And I know that we've sort of spoken about this briefly before on the podcast, but I think it's also the ways that we connect with certain topics and what we're bringing. And I think that's part of the non-reciprocal relationship. So
Yeah.
if something that we're watching with Scandal, I know a lot of people who have been cheated on or, whatever side of the coin that they're on feel very impacted by that because it brings up things for them. And it's almost just like ship that carries like all of our shared emotional baggage more or less. And so when we have conversations online, it's yes, it's about Ariane and yes, it's about Tom, but it's really us just like as people talking about this thing that's incredibly painful and has
Yeah.
impacted all of us to some degree. And so I always find that to be interesting is like pop culture in general is really a mirror of what's happening with people all around. So it's less
Mm,
so much about the two of them and more like what are we doing here? Like, why is this such a
yeah.
common thing amongst like a lot of women are saying that they've experienced this and they've felt this way. And like, it's really unfortunate to see how we connect with those things, but it is just it's such a human thing. Like we all go through
Yeah.
shit in our lives. And so yes, we feel, sympathy and empathy and we feel connection with those people because it resonates with us, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really, really well said. Yeah, and it's like this shared experience that people can
Yeah.
relate to and connect with each other. I mean, we even see it like, at protests, people coming
Yeah.
out together who don't know each other and who are supporting like a similar cause.
Right.
There's so many examples of that. Obviously, very different than like celebrity viewing, but
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point that there are like some shared realities and shared experiences that can bring
Yeah.
us together.
For me personally, I feel like I mean, hence why I'm in Heather's living room. I feel like Heather for me is somebody that, while watching Salt Lake City, I mean, I just think she's hilarious, and I really enjoy watching her, and I just feel like I don't know. There's just something that's really powerful about her. I think her story around like the Mormon church, even though like I have nothing to do with that and I have no personal history with that,
Yeah.
there was something about her strength that really resonated with me. And I think that I don't know if role model is the right word for me in terms of how I feel about it, but I
Yeah.
do think that there's a way that she carries herself into adulthood and into motherhood and into her own independence in her 40s, I think, 30s or 40s. And that I think is just really cool and something I definitely look up to. And I think like she is somebody that is very celebratory of that and loves to connect with people. And I know when Rihanna had like liked a post or had said some comment about
Yeah.
liking her, she reacted. So to me, I'm like, yeah, okay, like we can all feel that way about people that we
Yeah.
look up to. And I think it was sweet to see her sort of be really excited by that.
Aw, I love that. I totally forgot about that. That's
Yeah.
so true, though. We have seen that a few times where celebrities have like chimed in and people are like,
Yeah, like I think that's why Jennifer Lawrence came to mind earlier because I know that at the Emmys she had like gave a shout out to Salt Lake
right.
City and like it's just so fun to see celebrities be fans of Bravo and vice versa because it just shows that nobody's really on a pedestal. It's just the type of content you like and what's popular, like, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Oh man, it is really nice though when you do connect with someone that you see on TV. And like with Heather, we've been able to see a lot of her journey. We've been able
yeah.
to hear a lot of her journey and we've seen her growth. We've seen
Yeah.
her really come through like on the tail end from where she started in season one to where she is now. And
Hmm.
like looking at just what just happened, she was really powerful and really strong in her voice and in her stance. And I feel like she brings a lot of humble, messy humility to just
Yeah.
life in general.
Yeah.
And something that, yeah, is really admirable about her. Yeah.
Yeah. Love Heather.
Oh, we love her.
So I think in general, like we've been seeing such an increase in the popularity of Bravo. I know it's been huge for so long, and I've only really been fully invested into the tight-knit community of Bravo, the Bravoverse for about, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 years now. But there are some like long-term diehard Bravo fans. So I'm certainly not wanting to take away from that. But I know that the Vanderpump Rules stuff, and I think even Salt Lake City to some degree has really ranked in a ton of new um lovers. And I think that it really has, I think just them being memeable too, like that's really contributing to a lot of the popularity too. Like whether you actively watch Bravo or not, like you have seen the memes, you've seen the references, and it's just hilarious. But do you feel like there's anything in particular that makes people so like invested in Bravo produced shows versus others?
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of like we were saying, whatever we're seeing like
Hmm.
it's like a reflection of something about us.
Yeah.
Like we see something uh in them that we see. in ourselves or that we want to see in ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, or that's like an expression of something. And it can really help us in terms of our own identity. There's a real connection there. Like, I know it's not Bravo, but just one example that's really personal to me is Schitt's Creek. And I know it sounds silly because it's a funny show, but it also touched on a lot of really important and really serious topics. And when the show came out, it was around a time for me that I was still kind of figuring out like who I really am with a newfound freedom to do that that I had never had before. So it was
Mhm.
kind of like this blank slate to really discover how I wanted to express myself.
Nice.
And just the boldness of the way they spoke and their fashion choices and their humor and approach in life, it had like a huge influence at that time.
Mhm.
So I think sometimes the timing for people
Yeah.
and, when we do get to see really important topics addressed that
Mhm.
can really relate.
Mhm.
I think about things even like having representation. If we see that, maybe our sexuality or our appearance, our body size, our skin color, those things, um, we see that representation. And so it might be something that we connect to
Yeah.
and latch on to a little bit more firmly, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
100%. Yeah, completely. I totally agree with that. Um, and I think like Bravo is sort of tuning into those conversations now more than ever, which I'm really grateful and excited for, to see sort of how these shows develop in response to how people are connecting with it.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to see like if other shows are sort of going to start popping up that aren't so like the same sort of template of like basic gender norms and basic beauty standards. Like it'd be cool to see that sort of continue to expand. But I'm also thinking too about just I think the world is really fucked up right now. Like there's a lot
Straight
of
up.
shit going on. And I mean, there's always shit going on, but it's just like with COVID and just like everything that's happening internationally and also here at home for a lot of people, like just it's really hard financially, and a lot of people are in really shitty jobs,
Hmm.
needing to make ends meet. And um, I think that reality shows can really be such a source of okay, like it's a completely different world that people can invest themselves in, and it's so immersive, and you can get
Hmm.
so latched on. Like your attention is completely zoomed in when you watch these shows. So I think that's really attributed to people wanting to watch, whether they are personally connected to it or not. There, it's a way of learning, it's a way of connection. And I think in a time of a lot of isolation, these shows do provide a source of socializing, even though it is not two-sided.
Yeah.
But like you were saying on social media, it kind of is like when we're sitting on the couch watching these shows, you go on Instagram and find their page and you can like and comment and like you can totally interact with these people. They are not like siloed away.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to think of like this potentially being a source of a lot of socializing for some people. And for me, like I definitely dove into Housewives around COVID, and it was a huge way of me getting some laughter in when I really needed it. And so again, like there's that emotional investment there, like when you're almost not relying, but like you're emotionally invested in these shows to provide you with some sort of like basic need. Like we all need to be socializing. The stakes get really high for some people, and the investment gets really high. And so I can see that both being a caution, but also a positive, depending on who it's with. But definitely something
Yeah.
interesting to think about.
Wow. That is such a good point. So many good points and very
Oh,
well said.
thank you.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. And I think that is really true. Like we've talked before, I think, about how it can kind of feel like an escape sometimes,
For
but it
sure.
can also feel like a way of connecting without having to like fully put ourselves out there or fully like interact or explain
Yeah.
ourselves. Like we can still feel whatever we're feeling and whatever's coming up, but
Yeah.
we don't have to explain it or take the risk with the stakes being higher to really like go out there and interact with another person, but we still
Totally.
get that, right? And I know like there have been times with us and with some of our friends as well, like where we have to take breaks from tuning in and really watching. just based on everything that is going on. It can feel a little tone deaf at times for
Yeah.
sure, just with everything happening in the world, right?
Mhm.
Um, and at the same time, like there are benefits to it. And I think a big one you kind of touched on is just the community. Like it's not just our individual relationships with the people that we connect to that we're seeing on TV, but there is a whole fan base around that. There's a whole community around that. And I
Yeah.
think you used the word immersive. That's like the best word, probably, because it really is immersive. You get to be connected to this entire community, and that's
Yeah.
really difficult to do in the real world for a lot
Yeah.
of people for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And I feel like, I mean, I know that all fan bases of some degree have their own thing. And like, I've never been one that was into like Harry Potter or like
Yeah.
anything like that. I wasn't invested in anything.
Yeah.
So this is the first sort of like fan base I've really been part of and I've actually like interacted with. But I have to say, like, they are so fucking funny. Like the memes are really well thought out and really well constructed. I also love the crossover of like astrology and
Yeah.
and reality TV, but there's also like so much great analysis that happens as well if you look
Yeah.
for it.
Yep.
Like can't be bothered. But
Hey.
I just feel like there's just so much to give. It's really the gift that keeps on giving for me. And it's just such a source of happiness. And I think when it's sort of meant for that purpose of like escapism to some degree, it also just a solid coping mechanism for a lot of people. Like
Yeah.
I know I've told you about this, but I'm in like a pretty high stress job. I know that a lot of us are. And there's like some days where I'm just like really having a brutal time at work. And even just putting it on and having it in the background in my headphones can like really decrease my anxiety while I'm at work. Just because it feels like this, familiar thing to me, like having women scream at each other. It's just really soothing to me.
Soothing white noise.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's just like it reminds me of who I am outside of work. And who I am outside of work is a lot of things, but one of them is that I love this content. It makes me happy. And it also gives me this world into like these friendships that I think are really fun. Like they do cool things together. And like I love having this window into this world that like I'm not really part of, right? Like I'm not in Beverly
Yeah.
Hills Hotel eating oysters, or I'm not like at Hong Kong screaming at somebody about having Coke in their bathroom. Like that's not my life. But I love to sort of like dip into that when I need to just sort of like compartmentalize a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, that's honestly another really good point. And just familiarity. Like
Yeah.
I'm recognizing that this is another part of my life or my world, or this is
Hmm.
something that I connect to and it's familiar and it's comfortable. So I think that can be a really good reminder for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah. I think sometimes like for me, um, I haven't really shared anything around this, but I'm sure someone somewhere can relate to this. Like I have had somebody
Somebody.
help. But like I have not had a lot of experience with like female friend groups.
Hmm.
And I don't have sisters. Like I grew up with two brothers. I had like really male dominated family. And I've always felt like pretty socially awkward around like female friendships because I just never really had that experience. I was never really able to connect to that experience like many others were. And so I really got it felt like I got to be a fly on the wall a little bit and kind of
Yeah.
see what it was like to have those friend groups, even though a lot of times they're fake or they're not always great friends. It was just kind of interesting to kind of observe like sisterhood and
Yeah.
female friendships and that kind of female empowerment kind of dynamic from a
Yeah.
different I don't know, in a different way.
Yeah.
So for me, like that was something that I think had been lacking in my life for a while.
Mm.
And I feel like it's pretty solid now. And in part due to due
Yeah.
to this show, right? That it's something that we all connect about and we all talk about. And so that I think that can be another aspect for people.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting too, like, and I totally resonate with that because I would watch some scenes and I would think like, oh, that's something that like I would do. And then to see how like not well received it is, it's like,
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay. So I feel like in some
Oops.
ways it almost like shows us how what do we see friendship to be? Like we had an
Yeah.
episode talking about like apologies. Like we really saw many different types of apologies and
Yeah.
how what we would appreciate from that. And everybody's so different. Like that's one thing about the show is like every single housewife across all of them has a different standard of what closeness means, what respect means, what an apology means. And so to see like a vast variety of different types of friendships, I think is really cool to witness. And you can sort of pick out like, I want to be this type of friend to my friends. Or I've even been inspired watching this show sometimes of like ways that I can connect with my friends too. Like I
Yeah.
love seeing them host parties for each other and just do fun things. Like it makes me want to be like that for the people in my life. So it's not so isolated to the screen, but it actually does translate in real life too, which is nice.
Oh man. Um, so we've talked about why we're so drawn in, right? But what
Mhm.
about any cautions? Are there any downsides that we see or potential downsides to having this type of relationship with these
Yeah.
Bravo Labs? What do you think?
I feel like what I sort of mentioned earlier around like the stakes being really high for some people. So if we really invest the importance and significance of somebody's actions and we really align with them and we sort of see that as potentially like a blueprint of how we want to be a friend, how we want to act as a partner, how we want to, navigate conflict. Like there's so many things that this show that Bravo produces touches on that I think if we sort of connect and latch on to one or a few people as examples of how we want to be, what happens when they don't align with something that we would values wise. And then I can totally see this like internal conflict because this even happens to me sometimes, even when I really like a character and then they act in a way that I just don't agree with in a conflict. And I'm like, wait, do I have to say that I don't like this person anymore?
I know.
Yeah. And so I think it's like lacking the like that everybody there's going to be things that we do and don't like about everybody and there's so much the more vulnerable that the cast members get and the more that they share the more that there's opportunity for us to not align with everything so
Yeah.
unless we have a good sense of like we're not going to like everything that everybody does and says that there's going to be some gray areas both on screen and off screen and normal sort of like in-person friendships
Yeah.
relationships if there isn't that like foundation for somebody and like their only source of socializing would be watching shows like this, I can totally see that being like a fine line to walk. And I think also going alongside that, holding them to a standard that they need to, completely as a person identify with everything that we find that we are aligned to passion wise, like,
Mm-hmm.
political ideology and like who they're supporting brands that they support like all those things are huge ways that we sort of navigate those things so I can imagine somebody who I don't know, is like vegan cruelty free makeup brand and like they're really passionate about that. And then like their Bravo Lab, you know, produces like a skincare line that's not that way. Are they gonna then
Mm-hmm.
question their own values and still support that brand just because they really like that Bravo Lab? Like I could just see that happening.
Yeah.
And I think that that would be a negative for sure.
Wow, that's a great point too. Yeah. There was kind of a an example like that in
Mhm.
Real Housewives of Melbourne, doing another another shout out there. I think you should really watch it, but um it is really interesting and that is something that I definitely struggle with is like um I think they keep their cards close because they know that it could really affect their spot on the
Hmm.
show. So I'm sure there's a lot that we don't know, but it is hard. And I think we just have to remember that like this is just the spice of life. Like we
I love that.
that's my favorite. It's the spice of life, just we're not always gonna agree on everything. There's gonna be times where it's like that wasn't your best moment. But we can just move forward and look past it and recognize like we're not always going to agree or have the same opinions or approach things in the same way.
Yeah.
Um, but it doesn't necessarily define that whole person if it's not like a pattern of their behavior or
Yeah.
like, consistent. But yeah, I think like you were saying, just the idea that do I have to just write them off completely now?
Yeah.
That can be really challenging, but I don't think we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I fucking love that saying so much.
Feed the poor babe.
Not the baby, not the bad one. God, that's fucking funny. I haven't heard that one in a while. But yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think at times thinking of like that online community and that fan base, even if I could touch on Skin of All just one more time.
Just a little.
There were like some people who were actually quite supportive of Raquel and Rachel.
Yep.
And I remember seeing some discourse being like, who's even out here supporting her? And
Mhm.
I can just see some people maybe feeling a little gray about it and would sort of be like lopped into this like cyberbullying mentality and like
Totally.
I'm hashtag team Ariana and I'm hashtag this like this us versus them sort of thing. And I can
Yeah.
just see that um just sort of adding on to the constant narrative and like unfairness of treatment of people who are on Bravo. Like to a certain degree, it's like we have to have some sort of like respectability and like not completely cyberbully people like off the face of the
Yeah.
internet. But like I think it's I can just see that sort of like not feeling like they can within their own little online space share how they really feel about some things.
Yeah.
Not that I am at all Team Rachel, but just to I think that there are some
Just
people who
throwing it out
are,
there. For
and like
sure.
that's the beauty of this type of content is like it's drama. We're here to have different opinions about it. It's
Hmm.
conflict. Like nobody's gonna feel 100% one way or the other. Like to me,
Yeah.
that's what's so interesting about it. And I find like there are some people who take it to a level where it's like we all should somehow be feeling one type of way about it, which
Yeah.
is not the purpose. Like the purpose is
Yeah.
to cause conversation.
Yeah. There is space for all of it. Like there's enough space for all of it. And I totally agree. I think sometimes it can go way too far. I'm trying to think if we've ever seen any examples where the celebs are kind of like really goading their audience and like,
Mhm.
kind of domping their audience, I'm gonna say. Like,
Oh God.
I know. I never thought
Mhm.
I would ever say his name on this podcast. We can bleep it out.
Yeah.
No one needs to hear that. But you know what I mean? Like really just kind of inciting them to act or to like take someone else's side. I don't think we've ever really, I don't know. Do you
You
remember
know
anything?
what? Like, well, for me, I think the thing is like I don't have Twitter, which I think or X,
Yeah.
whatever the fuck. Like I don't I think like that's a huge other level that I am not tapped into. Like the commentary, I see memes and photos, but like the actual commentary I'm not as part of. But I mean on Potomac, Miss Candace is out here like saying a lot of really crazy shit, honestly. Like from the tweets that they
Oh,
do put up on
damn.
the screen, like at the reunions or whatever, like you said once on social media that she is blah blah blah. I feel like that if you are like, and I am a fan of Candace, do not get it
Yeah.
twisted, and I think she's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
But I could like see it almost like, okay, like we're really like feeling this type of way, like bitch is a fraud. Like that's like some pretty big statements, you know?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like I can't recall any in particular, but I know she definitely pokes the bear. She definitely
Yeah,
stirs the pot and she
yeah.
loves a good, well thought out insult.
Yeah.
For sure. And yeah, I guess just in terms of like encouraging people to take action or like promoting
Mm.
cyberbullying and like promoting violence or anything like that. I wonder how production would handle that. Like, I don't know if they would get involved, but
Yeah, no, that is a, I mean, I think we're even seeing that with Monica in Salt Lake City a little bit. Like, I think it's going
yeah.
to be really interesting how they handle this because, and I know that we've mentioned this once again before. This is going to be a thing once we have like 100 episodes. It's going to be
Yeah.
like, I said this once. But you know, like we are to the point now where people who were, but I mean, Monica, I hate to call you a fan, but you know, like let's just say a fan, more or
I mean,
less.
she was.
She was, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not higher, less
Yep,
than. It's just somebody who enjoyed the show and
just is.
had the content. You know, or potentially like cyberbullying or like part of these like fake accounts and like kind of going along with like some narratives online that
Mhm.
are quite destructive to people's lives. Seeing them sort of now be on the show, how they handle that. And I know that they do big like social media clean outs essentially of people's Twitters and Instagram, just like politicians. Like they just kind of go through all their Instagram and like delete a ton of shit and like make it so that when the show releases and people start following them, it's like a completely pristine Instagram account.
Same.
But like, yeah, I'm really curious to see how they would handle situations like that in the future. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like there haven't been like too many scenarios
Yeah.
that were so big and rocked everyone so much to feel so strongly other than like this situation with
Yes.
Monica and Scandival.
Yeah,
I feel like
honestly.
those are kind of the two big ones.
I unfortunately do feel like those are going to become more um often, like more frequent than
Yeah,
we've seen them, only because like you see the type of views that it gets, and like,
exactly.
and something that heard recently that I do unfortunately agree with, even though I do love reality TV, is like the more fucked up that people's lives are, the better for the show ultimately. And like
Hmm.
that is really an unfortunate reality that, personally, as somebody who likes reality TV, I don't want people's lives to be completely ruined in order for me to be entertained. Like I really do
Exactly.
just enjoy the mundane shit.
Yeah.
And like I'm more than happy with like little petty conflict. Like please do not feel like you need to give us a feast for like every single one. Like let's keep people's sanity and mental health in check.
Yeah.
But I do feel like just based off of how well that those shows have done, that it would probably happen again.
I hope I hope not. I mean, I also feel like production is being held accountable more now than
Yeah,
ever.
true. Yeah.
And I do kind of feel like that's going to be trending upwards,
Yeah.
just based on it being fucking 2024. But I also look at like the new season of New York and how well that did, and
Mhm.
everyone was relatively amicable with each other,
Yeah.
and any drama was like quite petty,
Yeah.
but they're still so lovable and like entertaining. So you definitely can do it without having to destroy people's lives. So
Yeah, and I
hopefully
think
that
that's
is the
like
way it will go.
leaning, I think that's like gonna be leaning into getting casts together that are just like cool. Like I feel like that's something with the New
Yeah.
York cast, that they are just like genuinely just cool women, and like not to shade other people, but fuck it. Like they're just a really cool cast, and I think
Yeah.
like they did such a great job of putting those people together that it wouldn't need to be this like huge heartbreaking storyline in order for it to be successful. And I think there's even some people online that are like, Beverly Hills needs to step it up, and like in comparison to Salt Lake City. And it's like they're each good for themselves. And like I
Exactly.
actually loved like watching Salt Lake City and then going to Beverly Hills, and Sutton's on a date, like her first date with somebody random. Like it was actually kind of nice to just be like, okay, just
Yeah.
like back to Beverly Hills, like everything's fine.
Yeah, that's such a weird take on
Yeah.
a TV show. Like they need to step it up and amp it up. I feel like I don't know. It's just giving like I don't know. I can't even go there. Like
It's giving something.
it's giving something disturbing.
And I
And
know
just
that, yeah, I know that they have said in the past, like, oh, Shannon Bedour is like coming back on despite everything, like a true professional. And it's like, there are, like, I actually like when they're just people who have boundaries. Like, I actually really
yeah,
respect that about them. And like, you know, even Kyle is an example. Like we've sort of said, we are sort of guessing that this may be Kyle's last season. Not that she said it,
mhm,
but it just feels like this is the end for
yeah,
her. To be like a true professional, to like keep giving us drama with her family, and like it, to me, it's like it's more authentic when she's just like, hey, I'm in a really fucked up place, and like I need to stop this toxicity in my life. Like I don't want to see this like tired show where it's
I
just like
know.
constantly like enduring so much family trauma on the show just for entertainment. Like, no, please go be well and happy.
I know. Like at some point it does get tired and like I don't really think it's going to be very good for us as a society to constantly be seeing these
Yeah.
negative, toxic, like we need to have some balance. It can't all be toxic and heavy all the time. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good for anyone. And that's not really what we want to promote or encourage. Like,
No, not at
don't
all.
worry, there will always be toxic shit. There will always be toxic fights and conflicts and some negativity, but like, I really do think that that would get tired quickly for people if it was all heavy like that. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I think even Teresa and Melissa's conflict,
I
like
was
we've
just
talked
gonna
about, is
say,
is exhausting. Like
yeah,
it's so unfortunate to see this family dynamic after like 10 plus years at this point. Like
Yeah.
just and I'm so grateful that I've like just sort of watched Jersey all sort of at once and I haven't been like waiting for episode each week because that would be 10 years of my
Yeah.
life dedicated to that. But it was like a few weeks for me. But like could you imagine like being a long-term like fan of the show? Just like every single week is the
Oh my
same
God.
shit. No.
Yeah, I think that is a good example of it going on for too long.
Too
And that can be
long.
really, really hard and really heavy, I think, for someone who is able to relate to that so much. Like you're trying to get away from that,
Hmm.
or you don't want to be confronted with it all the time, the heaviness and the reality of family conflict and
Yeah.
turmoil. So, like, we do need to have that in doses. It can't be
Sure.
all like that because I think people will get turned off by that.
For
I don't
sure.
know.
Yeah.
That's just me.
No, I 100% agree. And I think like this is sort of the change in like newer fans of Bravo versus because like people who really like Vicky Gunvalson and are like still
Yeah.
very much following her life
Mm-hmm.
and are into that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, that like, there's a group or even like the OG cast of New York, like there's a group for them and they can sort of continue to have those like parasocial relationships with them.
Yeah.
But then still make way. There's room for everybody. And so I love to see the change that Bravo's making and
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, look, like nothing will ever take away what has already been done and been established.
Yeah.
Like it is what it is, and that they did their part. Like they really
Yeah.
carried us into where we are now, and like
100%.
nothing takes that away. But we're also in a very different place as a society, I think. And
Yeah,
so,
100%. Yeah.
it's not like a this or that, but
Yeah,
it's like
for
all
sure.
part of the bigger story, you know?
What was it that Heather said in her like opening line last season? Like, just like my ancestors, I am trailing my own path.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah, something like that. That's basically the vibe of the new seasons.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Truly.
Slay.
Yeah. I also think about like how attached we get. Again, we've talked about this a lot, but how attached we get to some of these um, celebs or icons or whatever you want to call them. Um, and again, I think that can be really tricky if it is more one-sided. If you are on a platform that does interact with them more.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're on a podcast or in media, or you're like a journalist or a reporter or something like that. Like, you maybe do have some more interaction and you feel more entitled or more attached to them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that can also be really hard if it's like, wow, I thought that we were closer than we actually were.
Mm.
Or like,
Oh.
that phrase of like never meet your heroes. Like
Yeah.
you idolize these people.
Yeah.
And we've even heard stories at BravoCon,
Mm-hmm.
where people are going and meeting celebs and they're like, wow, they were like really rude, or that's not what I was expecting. And that can be really like disheartening and disappointing.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
there's just one quick shout out. There's an example of this. There's a documentary, I think it was on Prime, called Queenmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of follows a similar story of someone who was a journalist kind of around the time that New York socialites were becoming a thing and becoming celebrities. And this journalist, it just kind of follows their story
Mm-hmm.
of them blogging and having this connection with Tinsley Mortimer from, was she Beverly Hills?
New York, I think.
New York, yeah.
Yeah.
Duh. Sorry. Fucking duh. What did I just say?
Was it Beverly Hills? That's hilarious.
Just so everyone knows, my natural hair color is blonde. I'm not sure if that's a relevant
Aw.
fact, but I'm just saying. Anyways, following Tinsley in her kind of up and coming journey as a socialite, and I don't know, it was a freaking roller coaster of emotions. Just kind of interesting to see Tinsley in a different light and
Yeah.
see it from another perspective, but kind of left me with that question of like, when this is one-sided, how harmful can that be? How,
Yeah.
um, much can that really play into someone's mental health or how they're feeling about themselves? So if you're curious about the topic of parasocial relationships and you're Housewives fan, that might be a documentary to check out.
It's homework actually for the
It's
class.
homework. You're all it's due next week, so everybody get on
Yeah, write it. I want a thesis immediately.
it.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to watch that and check that out. I feel like Tinsley was always one of those people that just was so peculiar to me, like her story.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really interesting to watch. But I
Yeah.
also do feel like I want to touch on just one more
Yeah.
caution. And just in terms of having access to this content 24/7, like I know I mentioned earlier that I watch Real Housewives as a way of sort of compartmentalizing myself from work and sometimes coping while I'm at work, just as a
Hmm.
way to, just sort of remind myself of things I love and things I like to do. But I also do feel like having some separation from it is a positive thing, and having a chance to disconnect from Real Housewives can be a positive thing at times, because it's a lot of drama, like you said, it's a lot of
Yeah.
heaviness, and so I think
Yeah.
being able to connect is a good thing. There's my cat's tail in my mouth, just ignore that.
Yum.
Dinner. Yeah, I think it's important for us to be able to separate ourselves from them, and of course in that parasocial dynamic just like recognize, like we even said in the cheating and invested audience episode, I think just knowing when to check in with yourself, how it's making you feel. Sometimes ingesting a lot of conflict can be really difficult. Alfie has something to say about that.
What do you think, Alfie?
And I think even too, like we mentioned around the family drama piece, like that can be really tricky, depending on like your own family dynamic. And I know that it can be tricky to not internalize some of that messaging and sort of like bring it home at times.
Hmm.
So I think it's important just to check in with your body and like know how you're feeling about some conflict and when to take a break and not have too much access to it. And I think even for me, like having weekly episodes is a good way of monitoring my time with it and sort of like having it in small doses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So well said. We should create like a little tip sheet, like wellness when watching reality TV.
I love that so much.
Yeah, it's true though. Like I do think it is important to take some space, take breaks and have some boundaries.
Mhm.
And not just with, reality TV, but even social media. Like
Yeah.
I know, mom, I know already, but it's like, hey, we are hearing about this more and more, but we're not
Whoa.
really I know. Um but I mean, it is important, and I feel like it does. The line gets blurred a lot more easily when
Yeah.
we're not having breaks.
Yeah.
Um, and like you're saying, we might find ourselves more stressed or more frustrated, or we're feeling like some heavy emotions.
Yeah.
And it can be really important to separate ourselves to really check in, like you're saying, and recognize, like, is this playing into it really for me?
Yeah.
Um,
For sure.
because yeah, it does take a toll to be constantly, hearing that and immersed in that. I'm going to use the
Yeah.
word you used earlier.
Yeah. And I also think too, like when you have some separation, like trust me, I will watch a season in one sitting. Do not get it fucking twisted.
Oh
But
yeah.
having like one episode per week just is like just a support group for people that like can't stop watching Real Housewives. But I will say, just like it is nice to have an episode and really think about it for a while and then watch another one. I find myself sometimes in between, like even having the staggered releases of the reunion episodes for Salt Lake City has been cool
Yeah.
because I'll really think about the conflict, like her and Lisa, like the insults are just really just like replaying in my mind. And so it's not like 3 hours worth of content smushed together. And then
Yeah.
I have like, okay, let me like think about that while I'm bored. And like
Yeah.
it's just a lot.
Yeah. Exactly. We're more easily gonna just like tune out or almost dissociate.
Yeah, for sure.
So at Can't Be Bothered, we encourage mindful viewing of reality TV.
It's viewer discretion.
Truly viewer discretion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think like sometimes it can like the cautions are the same as like the benefits.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be really aware and just, I think that pause is so important so that you can check in and know how you're feeling and how you're being affected. Because it is nice to tune out and be like, the pressure's not on me to actually interact and actually answer and respond, but I still feel like I'm socializing. I still feel like I'm part of this and I'm relating to people and I'm not having to like be totally vulnerable and put myself out there. I'm a fly on the wall, but yeah, we just have to try and be as aware as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think like one of the biggest positives that I see out of it, and it may sound like a superficial one, but honestly, like the fashion of the show, I find to be incredibly empowering. I think especially Salt Lake City, just because like we're in Canada and it's fucking cold, so like seeing them in their
Yeah.
beautiful jackets and snowsuits is like fuck yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's just such a celebration of femininity for the most part, and it's just so fun to see like fashion choices, and I love how they get so dolled up for just themselves, like just going out with their friends, and I think it's really sweet. Like when they're at like sometimes on the girls trips they'll just have like a dinner in the living room, but they'll come down like so dressed and so
I
beautiful, and I just think it's so
know.
sweet. I feel like that's a really fun thing and a big takeaway for me of why I like watching the show. It's just so much like positivity in between the conflict. There's a lot of love there between them, and it's nice to see women getting along.
I know. Yeah, that's such a good point. I do love the fashion, especially Salt Lake City. Like
Yeah.
this time of year, it's just nice to see. And then I'm like, okay, well, when I'm gonna go out, I feel a little bit more inspired to like put
Yeah.
my jacket on. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. It is good. I really like the humor, like the sarcasm, the sass.
Yeah.
I'm always laughing out loud. I'm not a huge, I don't know. I I don't know. I just a lot of comedy doesn't do it for me, but I really appreciate a good shade. And so,
Yeah.
that always brings me a lot of joy when I watch.
Yeah. You do be LOLing for sure.
I yes, yes. The LOLs
The
are
LOLs are
nonstop.
real. And I also think too, like seeing and just going alongside the sarcasm and the sass, like there are a lot of like really strong women on the show. And I
Hmm.
really love seeing, people embracing beauty, like sort of defying beauty standards to a certain degree. Like I think that all the whoa, I think a lot of them still do, and Celine. I think a lot of them still do fall under that sort of umbrella of expected beauty standards. I don't see anybody like necessarily trending, like setting new trends or like
No.
whatever. But they are being themselves and they're expressing themselves and they are
Yeah.
like doing whatever the fuck they want. And just with that attitude comes like a lot of confidence. And there's no women on there that aren't shy of saying what they want to
Yeah.
say and feeling how they feel. And I think that's really positive for people, like you were saying, sort of navigating female relationships too. I think it can be really positive to sort of be surrounding yourself with really
Yeah.
strong-minded women who aren't afraid to speak up for themselves and not these weird dynamics of like, I don't know, like I don't want to like that doesn't fly on these type of shows. So every single one of them is going to be strong-minded and it's really cool to be around.
Exactly. That's such a beautiful point. I'm so glad you said that. Because yeah, on a deeper level, I feel like that is really reinforcing.
Yeah,
If
for
you
sure.
maybe aren't surrounded by a lot of strong women or strong female voices, or that's not something that's like encouraged in your circle,
Mm,
I feel like it can really reinforce that in you and bring a lot of confidence that, like, no, I can do this. I've seen
yeah,
all these other women do it, and like I can speak up and put my foot
for
down.
sure.
So, yeah,
Love
that's
that.
beautifully said.
Oh, thanks, B. Well, on that note, I want to leave off on a positive note about our girls and about our parasocial relationships with
Yeah.
them. But thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And as always, would love to hear feedback on what your parasocial relationships are. Who do you connect with? Who do you feel resonated with you watching the shows? And what do you think are the pros and cons to parasocial relationships?
Oh, man. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Can't Be Bothered.
Bye.